Hey everybody, we made it to the end of yet another season of Star Trek. This is Voyager's third season. We've taken a couple weeks off, it feels like, Clay, but we're back and we're going to do our annual season wrap-up. I don't know if annual is the right word to use there, but we're going to do a wrap-up of the season. This one felt like an annual thing that's going to be happening. Maybe we'll get into that. But we just finished the third season of Voyager. We have our little handy-dandy charts ready to go and numbers, looking at them, and we're going to talk about it. And we'll probably have a pretty laid-back conversation here, Clay. We're streaming this live. We'll see how the internet holds up. And if people have any comments in the chat, feel free to drop them in and we'll respond. Mostly, well, I guess I'll ask you, how are you doing first before we get into this? Let's bring you into the conversation.
I'm excited to do this because it has been long enough that I have little to no memory of any of these episodes, so it'll all be new to me.
I have my best and worst lists, and I had to look up what one of the best episodes was. I did not remember what it was.
Based on the thing that you sent me of what our ratings are,
yep,
not a great season. So I should say, not a memorable season.
No, a weirdly bad, unmemorable season. So I guess that's a good enough place as any to start off. So we, Clay, keep our tracks of our scores, and or at least I do, and we rank all the seasons against each other. And Voyager's third season came in at the second worst Star Trek season that we've done so far. The only one worse is TNG's season 1, which is pretty bad in and of itself. But so if it felt like it was a long year of Star Trek, it seems like it was. Our bottom 5 seasons are TNG season 1, Voyager season 3, DS9 season 1, TOS season 3, and TNG season 2. Those are like the 5 worst Trek seasons according to our rankings that we've had so far. But I don't know. I don't know how you thought about it. I felt it was a
slog.
It was a slog. Why, did this one feel different to you for any reason? Like its end point. When did we start doing this? Probably the start of like 2023, right? It feels like it's been almost a year because I think Picard season. What interrupted this? Picard season 3?
Picard,
something like that?
I believe so, yeah.
So it took a long time because of that and things. But do you have any... did this one feel different to you for any particular reason?
It didn't feel just different.
Yeah.
It did... I think Picard just made it feel really long. And also since it was... Especially the middle of that season... looking at the thing, I guess it's really most of the season, but it felt like there was little reprieve in this season.
That's true. We don't have a single 5 in this season. We each gave a bunch of 1s. We don't have a single 5. The best episodes are the ones that we had 2 episodes in the season that we both gave 4s to, and there was only 2 episodes that did that. So, I don't know. I'm mostly struck by how long this one felt, and this is a season where I'm looking at the episode titles, and a lot of them I'm like, gun to my head, I could probably not tell you what episode that was. Maybe that's Voyager's titling being at fault or something, but like Coda. Which one was Coda?
That was the one that comes at the end.
You repeat back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Fair Trade? What happened to Fair Trade?
That was when they established their coffee dealership on Rigel 7.
There's coffee in that nebula. Yeah, I don't know. It's and Russell Elledge is chiming in saying, I used to love Future's End, watched it many times when I was in high school. This time I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it like I used to. Is Future's End in this season? It is in this season. What the hell's...
For anybody listening, not the best episode for this to be your first episode of this show with us.
Are we? Well, I'm stuck in the constant state of, have we just watched too much Star Trek now? Mm-hmm. Where it's like it's the one with Neelix on the space station. Gotcha. I don't know where I stand with Voyager. I think like to me at this point, Voyager has settled into TV show that's on in the background, like not for me watching it, but like I if I was sitting and trying to make it through this on my own and not having a podcast to do it for, I don't see any way I could actively watch Voyager through this season. Like I wouldn't. This wouldn't be a show that I'd. If I was trying to finish my challenge of watching every episode, I would probably just run it as I was like working with the volume down at 10% and be like, yeah, I watched that episode of Voyager. I'm right through that one. But none of these are memorable. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about whether it's a Voyager as a show that's done it, or if it was just an incredibly bad stretch of 26 episodes in a row that we ran into at this point. Did this season feel different than season 2 or 1 of Voyager for you?
No, I don't think it felt really different. It felt kind of on autopilot a bit more than the previous ones, and the ones where they tried to take bigger swings didn't really land a lot.
Yeah.
I should say they just get muddled a lot. Like the ones where they try to do something cool ends up getting muddled by something. It's the not that we need to keep saying this, but it's the Enterprise problem where when they have a good idea, they don't really do much with it. And that seems to be the biggest failure of this show, aside from the characters being. I think the characters in this show are more memorable than Enterprise.
Yeah,
but
I would agree.
By a small margin, I would say. I think it's a lot of at least I know kind of what everybody's like to a certain extent, not as much as on TNG, but like I feel like I know Harry Kim better than I know
Travis Mayweather or whatever.
Yep, can't even remember his name. Travis,
the captain, or even the pilot. Malcolm Reed.
Yoshi, what's her? Hoshi
Sato, right? Hoshi Sato.
Yeah, like I don't know what the hell she's about, really.
No. Yeah, I
To be fair, do we really know what Harry's about? Harry has more screen time than Travis. Let's put it that way. But I don't really know.
Definitely has.
I don't know if we know him any
lines,
better. You know.
Yeah, he definitely has more lines than Travis. It's
kind of they ran into the problem where they gave Travis a cool backstory and then just kind of like forgot about him. Yeah. And then Harry, they didn't give any real interesting backstory, but he just keeps showing up.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, I'm looking at it now, and it's a list of, a lot of the Discord feedback and the feedback from people who watched is like, I don't remember season 3 being quite this bad, but apparently it is kind of bad, and no one really has a different opinion about it than that. It's I think the show at this point feels like it's settled into its early. What we had talked about in the previous episode, it's like it's now a franchise, and it just has like this template that it puts out, and it sticks along with it, and it's less concerned about making interesting stories and standalone little compartmentalized like tales about things, and it's more just what a Star Trek episode is supposed to look like. This is what we're going to do, and to make it look that way, we're going to jam sort of like Frankenstein parts together sometimes, just because we have all these different parts, and that'll be an episode that'll stick and be memorable, and it'll work for the show, and it'll work for the franchise. And I guess they've just run out of that feeling at this point. Like there doesn't seem to be a to bring back Enterprise, it does, to me, it shares a lot in common with Enterprise, which is just that it doesn't feel like it has it doesn't have like a confidence in why it exists, really. It doesn't feel like it has like a soul to the show that's like, the reason this show exists is because this is what we like to do on this television show. Voyager feels a little bit more cut and paste than that, and it ends up with the flatness of the characters. It ends up with the flatness of the stories. It ends up with A and B plots that are like just kind of jammed together a lot of the time. It doesn't really seem to have the heart of the other shows at this point. And we're going to get to 7 in the next season, and I think that like, on a character basis, I don't think the characters disagree with each other. I feel like on the other, even TNG, where everyone is fairly cordial, I feel like there was more disagreement between characters than there is on Voyager, interestingly. And I think 7's going to change that next season. So I'm interested to see how that actually mixes things up when you bring in like a cantankerous character. But outside of that, just kind of a waffly season of Voyager, unfortunately. It's sad. I guess this conversation is kind of encapsulating it. I just don't remember a lot of this as being memorable. I could probably say the same for Enterprise if I went back and did the same for Enterprise, but this was not a very memorable season of television. So
I was just scanning, excuse me, season 3 on Wikipedia to jog my memory, and it's interesting because some of them have really descriptions that sound interesting, like
a high concept that you should remember.
Yeah, like the shoot. Tom Paris and Harry Kim wrongfully accused, convicted, and incarcerated in unguarded alien prison. Tom gets stabbed trying to protect Kim, leaving him to find an escape plan alone. Meanwhile, Voyager is trying to find a way to prove their innocence. That sounds
I remember
fun.
liking the shoot. I remember thinking the shoot was a pretty okay episode of the show, but we both gave it 3s.
Yeah, I think it was another one where it was like, it was good-ish. Like they didn't really get there. But on the other hand, you've got
this is the season with flashback too, which is not particularly memorable. Like that's a pretty bad TOS callback episode too. It's like it all just is misfiring. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, on the other hand, from that interesting breakdown, you've got the breakdown from Sacred Ground, which is Kes is left comatose after contacting an energy field around a rock.
Yep.
Must
Sacred
watch
Ground is
television.
Sacred Ground is one of our worst episodes of the season. We both gave it a 1, and there were 2 episodes that we both gave 1s to, and Sacred Ground is one of them.
Whoever wrote these is not a Kes fan, because the next Kes episode, Warlord, just says Kes is controlled by an alien warlord named Tyrion.
Yep. It's I don't know. I mean, we've talked about the season a lot to this point, and it feels like we've been going on. Do you have any takes on Voyager? Do you talk to Sean Murphy at all about Voyager? I know he loves Voyager for some reason. Have you brought this up at this point?
We haven't talked. How dare you, Sean? What is wrong with you?
Well, I listened to your Return of the Joker podcast too, and he's like, modern Trek is terrible except for season 3 of Picard, which is the greatest thing that's ever happened. I was like, all right, well, I have to turn this podcast off at this point. But he's a Voyager stan, I think. Mm-hmm. Like he likes Voyager quite a bit. And I'm just curious, I guess maybe it's not something you're going to talk with him frequently about because you talk about it with me constantly, but season 3 of Voyager feels like it's my argument against people who stand for Voyager, I think.
I mean, I think he hasn't been on the show in a while. It might be good to get him on, especially once 7 shows up next season. Maybe we can get him on for a couple episodes or something. But I mean, I don't know. I can't answer for him, obviously. We don't talk about it because we don't get that personal with each other. But
we don't. Do we have any Discord listeners who are mega Voyager fans that you think you could identify?
I don't think
we have. I don't think we have many. We have a lot of people who say, I remember watching Voyager when I was in high school or like when I was young and it was on TV. It was like my Voyager. Voyager was my Star Trek that was on while I was watching Star Trek. But I don't think anyone really claims it as like their favorite Trek out of anything, which is sort of surprising because I think Voyager has a reputation for a lot of people really liking Voyager and thinking that it's like, if it's not the best, it's the second best option that you can go to.
I mean, I think we've talked about it a bit before, but I think a part of it is if it's the first one you've watched, then I can see it being your favorite because it seems like whatever the first one you watch is tends to be your favorite. Yeah. But also, I think there's a certain level of, I think it's comfort food to a certain extent in a way that Deep Space Nine isn't, because Voyager is not really trying to reinvent the wheel at all.
Yeah.
You're just kind of like, it's kind of I almost kind of wish it was more of a hangout show than it is.
Yeah. We mentioned that in a recent episode where they, whatever the one where they were all having like dinner at the end of the episode together. It's like, these characters don't really hang out all that much with each other. And you think being alone, they would. That would be something that the show would really focus on, is like, these people, all they have is each other, really. Like even more so than the other shows. But Not sure. Jaron Hatch says Voyager is the strange new worlds of Golden Age Trek. I think he means, is that blander? It's blander, homogenous Trek that's comfortable but generally lacks any real bite or perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of comfort foody.
Yeah. And Hat says, I love Voyager. However, part of it is because the TOS is my favorite and it reminds me of the 5-year mission, even if it isn't. However, on rewatch, I have a list of about 40 episodes so he's got a list of only about 40 episodes that he watches out of the 180.
That brings up something that I hadn't really thought about before. What is the mission of the TNG crew? Because you've got the 5-year mission for TOS. You've got we must protect this house from Deep Space Nine. You've got we need to get home from Voyager. You've got we need to explore for the first time what it's
Enterprise.
like to get pregnant from an alien woman on Enterprise. But TNG, everybody's just kind of hanging out. Like they're just cruising.
Yeah. Part of the development. I actually think it makes sense, right? Like the TOS, the evolution to TNG is that they are no longer on short-term missions. It's just kind of a way of being. That's the way that the Federation has developed, and they're just out there.
Out there looking for trouble.
Yeah, there's no bad energy in TNG. They're just kind of hanging out, waiting for the latest diplomatic mission to come along. And but it's kind of interesting, right? Like, because TNG having such an aimless backstory didn't result in an aimless series. You know,
right.
Like there's no overarching thing of TNG. It just is what it is. And Voyager has this overarching thing, and it doesn't help the show whatsoever.
Yeah, I think the problem is when you give the stronger the overarching thing, the more it stands out if you're not doing that thing. Like 5-year mission, what does that mean? Nobody knows. And TNG is just sort of like, we're just boldly going, man.
Yeah.
And in Deep Space Nine, it sets itself up for conflict with the Cardassians and stuff, but it's like the definition of the show isn't that it's constant. It's just like kind of, in
the background. Yeah, it's like a world
peaks and valleys.
Exercise.
But with Voyager, where they very clearly have a mission and a goal that they're trying to reach, it does make it stand out when they're not doing that. And I'm not saying that every episode needs to be an odometer showing how much space they've traveled.
It's that little the thing that's on a flight where you can see the plane on the map as it slowly ticks every 20 minutes. It moves like 1 pixel closer to where you want to be.
Yes.
Yeah, Voyager doesn't do that. So I guess general thoughts about this crew at this point. How has your opinion of the crew changed since season 1? And you can correct me if I'm wrong about your opinion on season 1. Generally, I think we were both pretty positive on this crew in season 1. Coming off of Enterprise, that's what you're saying, that they were all more clearly defined as to what they were and what they were supposed to be. There was this like delineation between the Maquis and the Starfleet characters. What's changed into the 3rd season for you? Positive or negative? It doesn't really matter, whichever way you want to go with it.
What has changed with the crew for me? Everybody's kind of running together more than they have, and I think this show, not to kind of backtrack a little bit, I think people like the memory of this show a little bit. Not to generalize, but I wouldn't be surprised if the memory of the show is what they like more than the show itself. Yeah, because like talking about the crew. There are plenty of people out there who are like, oh, Tom Paris, love Tom Paris. And like in my memory, I'm like, oh yeah, Tom is kind of fun. He does some stuff. But as we've been going through the show, the number one thing that stood out to me is how terrible of a character Tom Paris is because he never does anything. Like he's up front for like the first season and then he just kind of like fades into the background. And the same thing with Harry and the same thing with, B'Elanna's got a little bit of fire. Tuvok is always fun. Chakotay may as well have be sleeping with his eyeballs painted on his eyelids for the whole show, just looking for a planet to jump off and build a cabin on.
We might disagree about our strongest disagreement potentially might be about Janeway, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Janeway at all, really. I think Janeway I think is overrated as a captain. I think that people will bring her up and mention her in a way that I don't really understand. Like to me, she's treading in Jonathan Archer territory. And I think that Archer maybe even had a slightly stronger personality than Janeway does. And I don't think Archer's any great shakes, but Archer, at least for a little while, they went with that, like, you know, he's sort of like a good old boy who's out in space, and he's like, I'm kind of a racist when it comes to it and stuff. And Janeway's only personality trait, I think, so far is that they say she likes science, and that's not even really a big focus of her at all. It's not a thing. She's both schizophrenic and incredibly boring as a character, really. So I think it's like this horrible combination of I can't predict what she was going to do, and even if I could predict it, it's the least exciting option about what I expect to come from a captain on Star Trek.
Yeah, the strangest thing about Janeway is that they give her these moments of becoming an engaging character when they have in her schizophrenic nature. But the nature of her schizophrenia is that they don't ever feel like they are part of her character because she's not consistent with them. No. Because she kind of goes back and forth from wanting to be everybody's friend to willing to slit the throat of anyone who stands in her way to get her crew home. And it's a weird kind of thing where I kind of wish they would go one way or the other with it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's again, not to harp on the conceptual failings of the show. However many episodes, we're 50-something, 60-something episodes in.
Yeah, we're 60 episodes in.
But like the Maquis and Starfleet thing, I feel like would have a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? A lot more edge to it if someone like Chakotay was a little bit more headstrong and Janeway was a little bit, I don't know, more affable and less active, you know? So it causes, she has to kind of step it up or whatnot. But obviously, you know, the first female captain, you don't want to make her push over or anything. But that doesn't mean you can't. I think that's the thing is they really go out of their way to give her these episodes where she is very assertive, which is great, but it just doesn't feel that it's like it's part of her character. Or I should say, maybe it's the other way too. Maybe it's the other stuff that's not part of her character. Is she more consistently a hard ass, or is she more consistently like a
interesting.
Let's have a cup of coffee and just stare at the stars for a while?
What would you say? What would your inclination be if someone asked you to describe Janeway? Which way would you go with her as her baseline personality?
I
think I'm in the.
That's a good question.
I don't. In my mind's eye, she's not a hard ass.
Yeah,
you know, she's like fairly easygoing.
As a hard ass.
I think. So it's what you're saying. She exists in this awkward spot where I could see either direction being something that the show taking its concept seriously would embrace. So if she's a hard ass, there's a little bit of like a mutinous edge to it where it's like she's putting too much pressure on people on a journey that shouldn't have this much stress on it. But if you go the other way, there's an interesting angle of she's trying to be everybody's friend and how like that doesn't really work for a captain. Like Janeway has this room to be the most isolated captain because she's stuck in the situation where it's kind of like a work situation where like the boss being everybody's friend makes a lot of sense in this context because they're like a little community of themselves. But at the same time, that leads to all these weaknesses in the structure of how the ship is supposed to be run. But they don't do either. I find Mulgrew's performance to be bland too. I just don't. There's nothing about it that's really like doesn't have any of the Avery Brooks's just sort of like weird moments and things. It's like it's consistently tamped down, and
she needs more high-pitched squealing.
Yeah, it's more complaining, more excited shrieks and stuff like that when they find coffee and nebulas and stuff like that. But no, she's yeah, I think, and I think you brought up something interesting about Janeway too, which is that like I remember Alan Sepinwall, was on Twitter or something. He was so the TV critic for Rolling Stone was asked, or he brought up like who is the best captain on Star Trek, and he had a response. I don't remember whose like top response was, but his worst, he goes afterwards. He goes the worst is clearly Janeway, and so he got responses to this, and he retweeted one of them, and one of the retweets was, how can you say that when she's the first female captain that the franchise has had? So like, why are you going to go hard on her that way? And he said, he had a response that he retweeted, which is just like, I'm not even considering that because I just find her to be the most inconsistent and least interesting captain out of all of them. And therefore it's that kind of a thing. And the person responded in the follow-up is just saying, it's just too bad that you have to hold that opinion when she is the first female captain. The implication being that you really can't dislike the character because of what she represents for the franchise, right? So it's like this, like being female is enough to propel her into consideration for being an important character that way. And I think that like, is the franchise now, since it's trying to be a franchise, is it in that thing where why couldn't they make the first female captain be angry? I think you're entering franchise territory, right? Where you're like, well, what's going to be the legacy of this character? We have to be concerned that she can't be a bitch, right? Like, because then everyone would say, well, why'd you make the female character such like a catty bitch about stuff? It's like, well, I don't know. But I would prefer a quote unquote catty bitch character than what Janeway is, which Janeway is just kind of like milquetoast. And I would prefer there to be something there instead. And I wonder if it's, as the franchise itself is trying to smooth itself and like get rid of any rough edges, the character of Janeway is also a victim of that, where it's like you're not allowed to be particularly interesting at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think her gender has anything to do with it, because I mean, if you just changed her to being a man, she wouldn't be any more interesting or any better of a captain. You know, yeah, she would just be Archer. I mean, Archer is more consistent, but he's less interesting.
Yeah.
Because Janeway's spikes, I find, make her fairly interesting. And Archer has like one or two of those where he's, that I remember anyway. But
it's a casting issue where Bakula has trouble playing the angry guy. It doesn't work particularly well. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how much of a roadblock they came up with as far as that goes back then, because you do feel it a little bit that might have been a consideration of, she can't, first female captain can't be a pushover, but she also can't be a bitch. So we have to find something in the middle, but we have to make her interesting, and like versus like Discovery, where they clearly overcorrected with Michael Burnham as far as like making her. I mean, I feel like Burnham is kind of what you're saying. What you wish Janeway was feels like it skews more towards Michael Burnham, where she's just too overly active and too intense and too X, Y, and Z. But we don't have to get into that. But
too much X, you mean? There's a Y, no Y at all. Too much X.
But yeah, I think Janeway. I don't know. I like Janeway. I don't know if I like her as a. I don't think she's the best captain, but I don't find her performance to be objectionable or anything. Like I think Jaron Hatch was kind of on the money when he says the cast is the strongest part of the show, but the cast is better than the characters they play. I would probably agree with that. Where everybody's pretty good at what they're doing, but what they're doing just isn't very interesting.
So were they ever really good at all? Hat89 says, so Kate Mulgrew said that for the first 3 seasons, the producers were unwilling to show her making a mistake because they were unsure if people would accept a woman captain.
So that's in essence saying that the producers are definitively taking a stance that killing Tuvix was the right thing to do.
Yes, exactly. That's an uncontroversial decision. Right, because you do run into an interesting discussion around Janeway being a female captain, in that it's also a show. Like, to me, what's weird about it is that she's a female captain who is brought into the role, and you enter this weird kind of discussion space where the fact that she's female is the impressive accomplishment, right? So like, to me, that feels like that's a very modern thing. It's like an equity analysis. It's like the only thing that matters is that you are female, and bringing a female into the show is a good decision in and of itself. Mm-hmm. What I think is weird about it is that Voyager is also a show with a female showrunner at the helm at this point. So I'm struck by how little a female instinct did not bleed into Janeway more than like, I don't think that there's I can't think of a single episode that focuses on Janeway's sex being something that matters. And like, you can't even, it's not that they did it all the time with Avery Brooks, but DS9 had the Benny Russell episodes. Like, it commented on this. It was like, we're not going to focus explicitly on the fact that Sisko is black, but he is, and here's an episode that talks about it. Is there an episode that deals with Janeway as a female captain? Like, so what they do is they kind of avoid something that makes the setup worth commenting on. Like, they avoid the issue at all, just for the fact that they have a female captain representation aspect. And it's like, that's what makes it so uninteresting, is because Janeway is essentially just a neutered version of Picard in a lot of ways. It's just not an interesting. Why do it except to tick the box if you're not going to talk about this? Because I do see a lot of there's a very maternal thing that could happen with Janeway as the parent to this crew in a lot of ways. And maybe it's her age or something. Should Janeway have been older? I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing, but it's like these are the things that seem to be what the show is concerned about and not going to talk about at any point.
Well, I think there's the other way to look at it, that's kind of how they should do it, is that it should be just not necessarily getting into womanly things just because it's, like Picard. There's only one episode that talks about Picard being French, and I don't know.
First season classic.
Yeah. I don't know if I think there's two ways to look at it, and I think I don't know if it's ticking a box doesn't feel like the right way to say it, because it's like it is kind of, it was a big deal when it happened, and I mean there's no reason why you shouldn't do it. But yeah, I think it's very easy when you're doing this stuff to get into a sort of backflipping routine, or like the switching of the cups in Princess Bride's situation, where it's like you're trying to walk through the lasers, but you keep going like, all right, well, if we do this, then this will happen. But oh wait, if we shouldn't do that, we should do this, and switch. But if we do that, we should do this. So you trying to walk the tightrope of being considerate or whatever. And maybe it is the right way just to be like, yeah, she's a captain, but she just happens to be a woman.
Well, at that point, that strongly reminds me of what Discovery would do. So Discovery had gay characters who had no lived experience that was reflected on screen of being homosexual. There's no reason for them to be gay in the show. Like there's nothing.
Oh, is there a reason for them to be straight?
In the sense that why, if you're not going to examine what makes a lived experience unique, then you're just checking a box. That's the definition of checking a box, right? Like, so if you're not going to get into how metaphorically the gay experience is different from the straight experience with those characters, them being gay is just an arbitrary thing that's been decided. It's like, and it's the same thing that they did with the Adira. Is that the character's name? The
trans
they,
character,
them one.
Yeah.
I don't even not even trans. Just like didn't use gendered pronouns. That storyline culminated in the character saying, "I'd prefer if you called me these pronouns," and they go, "Oh, okay."
Sure.
And it's like, well, why do this? Well, what's the point of bringing this up? And I think that the Janeway thing is the same, because I can understand you want to just treat the female character the same as you treat the male character, but that's destroying the point of being the lived female experience at that point, because then you're just saying that we're all the same. So what's the point of having representation if everyone acts exactly the same?
Yeah, I to a certain extent, but I mean, like, why does I guess you could go the other way with it too then, and say like, well, how come they're not getting into the lived experience of being a man? Because what is there doesn't have to be like a starting baseline to who is on the show or who is represented on the show. So I don't know why you necessarily have to go out of your way to single it out just because they happen to be one thing versus the other thing. I know what you're saying, but it's like I think you can just have gay characters for the sake of having gay characters, because gay people do exist alongside straight people. So I think the Adira thing was a bit much regardless. Because I think that they were trying to inject that stuff into it, but just didn't have anything interesting to say. I think it's when you get into patting yourself on the back for that stuff without presenting a perspective, that's when it gets icky, because that's kind of what they did on Discovery, where they start patting themselves on the back for stuff that they just for doing things instead of doing things interestingly.
Isn't that what I'm saying about Janeway? They've just done something for the sake of doing it, really. So it's like
well, I'm saying, but like they don't have multiple episodes or any episodes where they end a storyline and Janeway says, "Isn't it? I just would like everyone to know that I am a mother," and then everybody stands up and claps for her. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what they were doing with Adira. They were kind of giving themselves a pat on the back for being so progressive. But I don't think Janeway just being there is the same thing.
So I guess that my confusion about it is that in an ideal world, I would agree that it doesn't really matter what you are being inserted into here, right? Like there is a sense that like true equality is to be like totally indifferent to whatever the setup is. It's like, yes, there are gay people in the world, so there's gay people on this show. There's a non-binary person, so there's a non-binary person on the show. There's a black people, so there's a black person on the show. But at that point, I feel like you are ignoring the fact that the differences are what make the characters unique. Because you could extrapolate that to all the characters could essentially be the same thing too, because it's like they're all semi-noble, whatever, like, you know, semi-hero people. But I think that like would it have been right for Star Trek DS9 DS9 to not do any Benny Russell episodes? You know, like in a true equality thing, Sisko's blackness doesn't matter, but it's only interesting if they do those episodes. And they don't do it all the time, but it's like, if you don't do it, I guess I just come back. If you don't do anything with this, that feels very checking the box to me. If Sisko is just a black man who, like, they never brought it up, even though it totally makes context 24th century sense in context of the 24th century, you would think no one would really care that Sisko was black. So what they did is they got clever with it, and he would have like flashbacks, to the 1950s, and it made sense. And it was like, oh, okay, this works in this context. And it was a nice metaphor for, the corrupt cops or the Dominion characters and stuff. But they're doing things with it. I just think that Janeway is... It's what Hat's saying. If they're scared of being like, well, we can't have a woman screw something up because then people will be angry with us. You're denying the humanity of women at that point.
Sure.
I think it's just like, I wouldn't want them to focus on the crew being like calling her like Mother Janeway or something like that, or some weird culty thing. But I think that there's a POV to bring into this. And she's no different than any of the other characters. Like, if she had a defining trait, it would be, to me, that she's the first female captain, and you should do something with it in the same way that Chakotay is allegedly a Native American. You should do something with that. But the show doesn't do anything with anybody.
They do plenty with that one.
We've seen Chakotay's ass bared freely in the woods. We haven't seen Janeway's breasts bared as freely.
I don't know. It's gotten pretty close. Is that one episode was where she ends up in a nightie or something?
Yeah,
they're pushing the boundaries. Yeah,
and that's the. She's not even allowed to, because Q's allowed to come in and just be kind of like, "Hey, Janeway, if you want to fuck, I'm down for it." Yeah. And Janeway doesn't respond to it, and it's like, I feel that those are moments to bring up the female response to that stuff.
Sure. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Yeah,
I wish they did. That's all.
Yeah.
They didn't explore Patrick Stewart's baldness. They didn't. I think people rubbed his head every once in a while in that show.
I bet he hated that.
She gets more maternal as the show goes on, according to Joan Hatch. So we'll see. Janeway basically becomes Seven's mother. Perhaps that is the outlet for them.
Oh, I bet that's why Mulgrew hated her so much. Because the new hot actor comes in and they're like, Janeway, how about you're her mom?
Kate Mulgrew is like 32.
I know.
But as we've said, Mulgrew looks much older than that. As she acts older than that too.
Yeah, she does. She has a much older style, I think.
Yeah, it has an old energy to her. Mm-hmm. Would you have gone older or younger with Janeway? If you had to add or subtract 10 years to Janeway, which way would you have gone?
That's an interesting question. I think I would have gone younger.
I would go younger. I'd have her be right out of the academy, like not out of the academy, but like fresh captaincy or something like that.
Yeah. I think that would have been having her in that situation with the Maquis of being like fresh out of the academy. That probably would have been pretty good.
I think that's a modern thing too, and I wouldn't be opposed to it. But if it becomes a metaphor for, the argument about like being the only female in the room who's not being taken seriously. But they don't draw attention to the female aspect. It's the fact that she's so young in this role that becomes like the doubtful thing.
Yeah.
And the Maquis can push back against that. And I think that would have meant something, but just isn't. Is it Voyager her first ship? Maybe, but how long has she been with it? Can't answer. I guess Voyager's brand new. I have no idea. It doesn't matter. But I guess our point comes back to that Mulgrew doesn't have the energy of an inexperienced captain.
Right.
She's never portrayed
again, that's even if it is her first ship, they don't really do anything.
They don't play it. Yeah, they don't play it that way.
I think also as far as her being a woman, I think if they played up her inexperience, or perceived inexperience more, that you naturally get multiple layers to that discussion without even having
Right.
to bring them up. Like she doesn't have to say, like they don't have to say, well, we wouldn't take this order from a little girl or anything.
Right.
You know, like you can just have.
It's mansplaining, right?
Right.
I don't.
Yeah.
And mansplaining is kind of a stupid like a concept in my idea, but like you can thematically portray mansplaining as someone like Chakotay thinking that Janeway does not understand what needs to be done
Right.
in command situations.
Yeah, and you can chalk that up to it's. You can play it as not believing that the captain is up to the task, but it also naturally has this secondary layer of, you know, misogyny or however you want to describe it, which could have been really interesting.
I only don't believe in mansplaining because the biggest mansplainer in the world is my mother, but she wouldn't be called a mansplainer because she's female. But I'm frequently explained things about why the way things are when I'm like, yeah, I did this myself. You're explaining it to me. So, anything else about this season? Let's see. What is this comment just popped up? JD says, maybe it's worth asking why have a female captain and why have a black commander captain? When DS9 and Voyager were released, were choices because the writers wanted to explore the ideas of racism and sexism?
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah, probably not, I guess, would be my take. Was there a black writer on Star? Who was the first black
That's a
writer
good
on
question.
Star Trek? Didn't that guy, who is that YouTube personality that was with Kevin Smith?
Oh, Mark Bernardin?
Didn't he write for one of the Trek shows? Did he not?
He was... I think he was like a writer's room assistant on Deep Space Nine.
Oh, okay.
And he wrote for season 2 of Picard, unfortunately.
Okay.
I say unfortunately because that season was hot garbage, and I think he's a very smart writer, so it's not the best use of his talents, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, he wrote for Picard season 2. Russell Hodge says, I don't know if there was a black. In all the Blu-ray extras, it's only white guys in the Star Trek writer. Well, and some Shakar, whatever, not Shakar. Is that the guy's name? Naren Shankar or whatever, who's Indian, I think. Excuse me. And Grapple John Zorn just continues, were they simply ticking boxes at the time? I mean, they were ticking boxes, I think. But DS9 embraced it a little bit more. And it's just tough because it's...
I don't like calling it ticking a box, though, because it's just because they're doing something different doesn't necessarily... like it. I don't know if there's needs to be any agenda or anything behind it. I feel like ticking a box implies agenda, where it's like they had... a young white guy, an old white guy. How many different white guys could you possibly have? You know, do something different. Woman.
Well, again,
captain.
but just doing it doesn't mean anything. That's how. Why do you not say the ticking a box is like we need to bring in? So ticking the box, the argument would be we need to bring some diversity into this office, right? Mm-hmm. So we're an office full of Harvard and Yale educated lawyers, and we're all white. We bring in a Harvard and Yale educated black man to bring some diversity to this office. That's to me is the checking the box. Like when the only difference is unsubstantial and it's just skin color that you're like, that's the only thing that you're bringing and changing is like this. Because you're basically saying like you're kind of making the argument like, which is fair, that it's like you're all the same underneath it, but the lived experience has to be different. You have to like there has to be a difference between those things, and I think that's my distinction. It's just like it's a false. You're not bringing in anything interesting if the only difference is just the skin color. If you're like in DS9, as I'm saying, got around it by they did comment on it and things like that. And that was some of the great episodes of the season deal with it because it's like about something. But the counter to it, I think, is that Star Trek is a hard show to do it because you're supposed to be in this utopian society. So it's like you're not supposed to see this stuff. It's like supposed to all be past that. It's just I think that the gas for that idea ran out in TOS in some ways, unfortunately, because you can't just continually have shows that like all stuff is behind us, so we can't talk about anything because there's nothing to talk about anymore at this point in society.
Yeah.
You know. I don't know. Hat89 asks, what's your favorite episode of the season? I guess we can just wrap that up with the best and worst. So it's either for us, it's either
to remember what the episodes were.
It's either the Dinosaur Galileo episode or it's Scorpion Part 1. Those are the two that we both gave 4s to. So you have to decide which one you like better.
Jesus. I guess Scorpion.
I think I go with Distant Origin is my favorite episode of the season.
I don't know.
I like the dinosaurs.
Yeah, I guess overall, I think as far if you're going like pure Star Trek episode, probably that one, because that one has more. That feels more like a capital S, capital T Star Trek episode than Scorpion does, I guess.
I feel like Scorpion was a bigger letdown than Distant Origin was like a pleasant surprise, really. Like, I think Scorpion is an okay episode. It's like it's an enjoyable watch. It's a 4 for me, but Distant Origin felt more Voyager-y in a sense. Like it took advantage of the ship being out there and all that stuff, and them trying to, having a race trying to track down Voyager as it's moving around. To be fair, they screen tested me okay. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they screen tested everybody. Who are some of the actors who tried out for Janeway?
Oh, that's a really interesting question.
Carl Janeway. Given a choice between rewatching season 1 of TNG or Voyager season 3, which would you choose, and why is it TNG season 1?
Yeah, I mean it is.
It is.
I don't. I don't know if that's just the rose-colored glasses of TNG even raising all ships regardless of season, but I don't know. I think it comes back to who you identify with, because I'm sure there are people who are Voyager people who would say season 3 of Voyager. It's tough.
I think TNG is so bad it's good, I think, is the difference. Yeah, like there's a charm to its badness. Voyager is a humming, well-oiled machine at this point that's putting out boring widgets. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But like the season 1 of TNG has just weird moments of like
Angel One, baby.
The pilot, when Riker boards the ship and Picard is like, I don't have time to tell you what's happened. So here, watch this video that'll recap everyone. And they show him a video of the episode to that point. And it's just like, wow, this is a decision. This is a narrative choice. It has
when will then be now?
Men are in like the dress uniform existed in season 1. It's just it's just like strange, unusual decisions that are being made. And Voyager doesn't make unusual decisions. That's the problem with it. But I would definitely, but objectively speaking, I think someone with no backstory would probably say the TNG season 1 is a worse collection of episodes than Voyager's 3rd season.
Yes.
Yeah. Russell Lodge says, I grew up on TNG, so I'm biased, but I still think it's better. So I'm going to go quickly through our best and worst, Clyde. Should we do the best first or the worst first?
Let's do the best first.
Best first. I have them ranked here. You can let me know if you disagree with anyone. I'll try to give you a little bit of a summary about which they are too. So our fifth best was worst case scenario, which is the Tuvok has the holo program that talks about the Maquis overthrowing the ship episode.
Yep, that was fun.
Unity is number 4. That's the Borg episode where they first run into the Borg who have broken away from the collective. Number 3 is Before and After, which is the Kess traveling backwards through time episode where they bring up the year of hell for the first time. Mm-hmm. And then our final 2, the top 2 are Scorpion Part 1. I have it number 2. And then Distant Origin is number 1 for me, the dinosaur episode. Those are the best. The worst from 5 to 1. two of these, the bottom two, we both gave ones. The other ones are kind of split ones. So I have number 5 is the Swarm, which is the tiny little ships with like one alien in each that they run into when they're trying to cross. I don't remember what else happens in that episode, and I don't remember why we didn't like it so much, but apparently we didn't like it. So the Swarm is number 5. Darkling is number 4, which is the, if I'm remembering, Darkling is the evil doctor thing where the doctor goes haywire.
Yep.
He has like an evil personality. Number 3 is Warlord, which is where Cass, as you said in that description, gets taken over by a warlord named Tyrion or whatever his name was. Mm-hmm. False Prophet is the Ferengi episode, which feels like we watched it 600 years ago.
Correct.
But that's our number 2 worst one. My memory of that one is, I don't know if you remember, just the ending where they were trying to fly through the wormhole, and Voyager's like just chasing that wormhole as it's flying around, and they can't fly through it. And the Ferengi, they don't shoot the Ferengi, anything like that.
I feel like that's one that people would be like, "Oh yeah, that one's pretty good," because in their head, they're going because it's connected to TNG.
It's got some Ferengi, right? Because it brings up the Ferengi that got stranded. Yeah, that's correct. And then Sacred Ground is our worst, which is the Cass touches the force field rock, and Janeway has to pray on it or whatever happened in that one. That's the worst 5 episodes of Voyager Season 3. So that's it. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the coverage of the season, our coverage of these 26 or 25 episodes. And we're moving on to Season 4, and we're going to be halfway through Voyager at some point in the middle of Season 4. So, any final thoughts here, Clay? Are we done?
I think we're done.
We're done.
I'm looking forward to Season 4.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to 7. I think changes are good for these shows.
I'm looking forward to 7 because it means the show will be over at the end of it. The 7th season.
That's right.
I'm just kidding.
There's an episode of Enterprise too called The 7th, right? I think that was one of the worst episodes. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it getting it shaking up a little bit. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to 7. 7 is caustic. So I think that's something the show needs. It needs someone who is like disagreeable on it. No one's disagreeable. They even like Neelix for some reason. You know, Neelix is just a bad, just a bad person. That's it. Thanks everybody.
I can't believe that they keep Neelix and they get rid of Cass.
Yep. And well, you read the Discord comment, right? Like apparently the discussion was to get rid of Harry Kim. That was the idea. That he was going to be the character to get the axe because they needed to lose somebody.
Right.
And then he won sexiest TV guide character or something like that, and they decided that they couldn't get rid of him.
Oh, we didn't talk about Kyle's question.
Oh, sure. What was that? We can go out with that one.
He said, assemble a starship crew using Deadwood characters. I feel like there's only so many in there.
Well, does the Doctor have to be the Doctor? Does Doc Cochran have to be the Doctor?
I guess probably.
Who's the captain of the Deadwood ship?
The captain of the Deadwood ship.
If Swearengen's not the captain, what role does Swearengen have?
Swearengen I think is like Garrick. That's who Swearengen is to me. I think it's tough because it's a Western, and the obvious answer is like, well, it's Deep Space Nine, so just slot him in there.
Yes.
But yeah, I think Swearengen works better as the can we trust this guy character than he would as the captain.
Yeah, he does. I mean, so Bullock has to be the captain by default.
I'd make George Hurst the captain.
Oh, sure.
That'd be a crazy ship.
I do like you commented on the Deadwood. Like Hurst would make a great Star Trek Discovery admiral, bad admiral character, and I would hate to lose him on that. But Charlie Utter would be chief of security. I think I'd have to have him be chief of security.
Yeah.
Transporter chief would be.
I feel like Charlie might be a better transporter chief.
I was going to say Shaughnessy, the guy who runs the hostel house.
He's barely a character. He doesn't count. Well,
he's a transporter chief though. In that sense, right? Like I just like his judgmental eyes as people are beaming down to sex planets and stuff like that. But
I feel more like security would be Bullock.
Okay. So we lose him as captain at that point. So the captain would have to be someone like...
I'm serious. I would have Hurst be the captain.
Oh, okay. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, you did say that Hurst would be the captain. And then Tolliver would be...
Tolliver is like the Quark character.
Okay. You want him actually just running the bar. He's not like a first officer type. He's not the second in command. With Hurst, that runs into problems, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I feel like Joni and Jane maybe are up at the front on comms.
I get
Or
Counselor
fly the
Troy
ship,
energy
whatever
from
it is.
Joni, actually. That seems like a real match made in heaven there.
Jane as the counselor would be pretty fun. That would be a good time.
Who's the Star Trek character that's been like drug addled? Is there one? No, right?
Not that I could. I mean, for an episode, maybe here or there.
Yeah,
but
for an episode, someone would be sick or like a guest actor. Yeah, I guess that's it. Cool. You can check out the Deadwood show. It's called Something Pretty, and it's got a podcast out there. It's on the YouTube channel for people who are watching this. T'Pol. Oh, sorry. What would T'Pol be? T'Pol would be... Oh, what? Sorry. Why is
That's
T'Pol being...
science officer?
Or is that who Jane should replace?
I don't know.
I'm not sure why T'Pol's being brought up.
I would
That's
make Saul the science officer.
Yeah.
Oh, drug addict. Yes. We forgot.
Oh, God.
T'Pol had that whole arc where she was just on Vulcan crack cocaine.
That's right. Oh, thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's understandable we forgot. Yeah, exactly. She had the drug. That would be funny to listen to back again. We're like, who's a character with drug problem? Like, I don't know. So it goes to Paul. We go, why is people bringing up to Paul? I don't understand.
I do know that if you were to make Star Trek more like Deadwood, it would probably bring Rick Berman back, given how many big fat titties there would be in that show.
He's Con Stapleton.
I say that respectfully, as he would.
He's Con Stapleton, just yelling into women's breasts while he squeezes them. That's all we need. And the trousers in Star Trek are very tight.
They are, yes.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We're done. Support the show at patreon.com/the Pensky File. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Just check out Rotten Heart Picture Show on Patreon. We're doing Video Nasties. We got 2 left. We're doing Evil Speak in November and Zombie in December. And then next year, we're going to be doing the Halloween series, which will be fun. We were going to do just the Michael Myers movies because there's 13 of them.
Yeah.
There's 13 Halloween movies total. But then I realized we already did Halloween 2018 on the actual show. So we'll probably just do all the other ones except for 2018.
Oh, right. So it knocked it down from a baker's dozen to an actual dozen.
Yes.
And you're able to do it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I blanked out. You're talking about next year's Patreon.
Next year's Patreon, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Not to question your decision. You're going again with you didn't burn out from the Friday the 13th marathon?
I didn't. Amanda was very burned out by that one, but she's very excited to do Halloween. I think it's her favorite franchise. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I was just my memory of it was that you guys were like, wow, this was a lot of movies and about the same thing. It is over the course of a year, so it doesn't feel like you're constantly watching them.
Yeah, the thing that's kind of nice about the Halloween movies is they do kind of, there's a lot of them and they do kind of go all over the place.
Okay.
Because you've got the classic original, and then the weird sequel, and then the one that has nothing to do with anything, and then they come back to Michael Myers, and then there's like a trilogy of sort of connected movies, and then they do the first time jump where they erase the sequels to do Halloween H2O, and then they do another. That Rob Zombie shows up for a couple, and then another time jump. So it's a little bit. It mixes and matches a little bit. Also, if you're listeners of the regular show, Rotten Horror Picture Show, we have had a massive list change where, as of a couple weeks ago, there have been at least 15 movies that have been added, which means there have been at least 15 that have been taken off. So it's a very different list than it was just a couple weeks ago.
In addition to all the shuffling that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every single movie on the list has changed position except for one. Can you guess what the one is?
Number one. Is it the number one movie?
It's not.
No.
It's number 10. A Quiet Place. The only movie that hasn't changed.
They nailed that one. They got that one right.
The Exorcist dropped like 40 spots, but A Quiet Place gets to stay at number 10.
Yeah, that's things making sense, I think. Yeah, it's a funny algorithmic list, but
very strange.
Yeah, so Mike Myers Halloween will be an interesting 12-part episode on Patreon that you guys can check out. And we'll be wrapping up Deadwood. We'll be doing a couple extra movies and other TV shows, and that'll be done. We'll be done. So finishing 2023 with some actual conclusions and stuff like that. So that'll be good. I guess that's it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hope you enjoyed the content. We'll be back with our next Voyager episode, which is the first episode of Season 4, Scorpion Part 2. Thanks very much. See you later.